You're not struggling to connect because you lack empathy. You're struggling because you've been responding to words, not signals. That quiet frustration you feel after conversations. The sense that something important was said without ever being spoken. That wasn't confusion. That was a message you were never taught how to read. Most conflicts in your life didn't come from bad intentions. They came from perception failures. Stay with this. Do not drift. Because in the next few minutes, you'll see why people keep asking for one thing while needing something entirely different. And once you recognize this hidden language, conversations stop feeling heavy, relationships stop stalling, and influence stops requiring force. Listen closely. Missing this has already cost you more than you realize. This video will equip you to finally understand the unspoken language that's been holding you back and help you to live the life you have so desired. So stay and listen till the end for this transformation journey. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Explicit Requests. You are no longer allowed to excuse the moments you fail to recognize what is unspoken, because delay is a choice, and hesitation leaves you vulnerable to repeated misunderstandings. Every time someone says, "I'm fine," you must assume nothing, yet perceive everything, because the words themselves carry the weight of avoidance, masking emotions that demand attention but resist articulation. The world has taught people to hide discomfort behind simple phrases, and the cost of ignoring this masks danger in relationships, decision-making, and daily interactions. Excuses for misunderstanding, for overlooking hidden needs, or for dismissing cues are the permission you give yourself to remain small, and that permission stops today. Stay with this. Do not drift. The next few minutes will explain why most of your conflicts, missed opportunities, and quiet frustrations were never accidents. They were perception failures. The phrase "I'm fine" is not a declaration. It is a signal cloaked in convention, a shield against vulnerability, a distraction from the truth that cannot be ignored if mastery over internal and external worlds is your objective. You must recognize that almost every human interaction is layered with unspoken requests, subtle yearnings, and urgent needs that words alone rarely capture. To disregard these layers is to accept repeated disappointment, to accept subtle manipulation, or to allow inefficiency to flourish in every environment you inhabit. The urgency is immediate because every misread cue compounds over time, creating fractures in trust, weakening influence, and diminishing clarity of perception. If you've ever replayed a conversation in your head at night, wondering what you missed, this is why. You must understand that the gap between what is said and what is felt is where chaos resides. When someone claims they are fine, yet posture, gaze, or tone contradicts this, the world expects you to ignore it, yet mastery demands you do not. You are accountable for perceiving what is hidden, because to remain blind is to surrender control over interaction and influence, leaving yourself subject to error, conflict, and unresolved tension. Every overlooked micro-expression, every unheeded shift in breathing, every hesitation in response is a signpost, a silent guide toward truth that must be interpreted with precision, not guesswork. Most people don't lose relationships loudly. They lose them quietly, one missed signal at a time. Do not accept discouragement, whether external or internal, as justification for inaction. The moment someone refuses to articulate need clearly is precisely the moment your skill in observation, inference, and interpretation is called upon. You must act with urgency because hesitation allows miscommunication to solidify into habitual patterns, leaving opportunities lost and relationships strained. Excuses are nothing more than your mind surrendering to comfort, and comfort is your enemy when the goal is unwavering awareness of what others truly seek beneath superficial statements. Right now, think of the last message you read that said "all good" and the tension you still felt. That feeling was information. The social pressure to appear fine is deliberate, consistent, and nearly universal. People are trained to mask pain, stress, frustration, and longing behind conventional language that signals nothing while implying everything. You must penetrate this armor, recognizing that surface-level affirmation never confirms internal satisfaction, desire, or contentment. To navigate these interactions successfully, you must measure silence against context, tone against expectation, and expression against baseline behavior. Every subtle cue is an invitation to understand more deeply, not a suggestion to ignore what discomfort you may feel in the process. Ignoring hidden cues has immediate consequences. A colleague in a meeting may nod in agreement, yet their eyes avoid yours because the pressure of hierarchy triggers hidden discomfort. A friend may assure you they are fine, while their posture contracts, their speech accelerates, and their gaze flits away, signaling internal unrest you cannot afford to miss. Each of these cues, when left unnoticed, multiplies miscommunication, erodes trust, and amplifies inefficiency, creating conditions in which resentment and disengagement fester silently. From this moment forward, every interaction you enter is testing you. Not your words, your awareness. You are responsible for detecting these patterns, for interrogating surface-level assurances, and for responding with insight rather than assumption. The danger of misreading others is amplified by your own inattention or comfort with ambiguity. You may claim patience, understanding, or tolerance, yet every time you accept words at face value without confirming emotional congruence, you surrender agency. Agency is not given. It is taken by those who perceive the subtle, who act on the unseen, who do not allow themselves to be guided solely by what is said. You must remove excuses entirely from your mind because every misinterpretation reinforces the illusion that spoken words carry ultimate truth, while unspoken desires remain urgent, real, and consequential. You are required to recognize the immediacy of unaddressed needs. When someone masks distress behind politeness or conventional phrasing, it is not a challenge, it is an obligation. It is your responsibility to perceive, interpret, and respond with precision, because failure to do so is a choice that creates tangible costs in efficiency, clarity, and influence. Words are cheap. Awareness is expensive, and you've been underpaying. The awareness of hidden cues is not optional. It is the foundation upon which trust, control, and mastery of interaction are built. Silence is not harmless, words are not definitive, and appearances are never reliable. Your discipline is tested every time another person claims to be fine, while their body, tone, or timing betrays discomfort or need. You must act as if every interaction contains a concealed message. Every hesitation, shift, glance, pause, or tone fluctuation carries significance, and your mind must catalog, process, and respond to these without delay. There is no room for error because misunderstanding compounds exponentially. Ignoring cues may seem convenient in the moment, yet the consequences ripple through every personal and professional exchange, establishing patterns of misalignment, frustration, and subtle hostility. You are accountable for bridging the gap between expressed language and hidden intention, and you will do so with disciplined observation, methodical interpretation, and immediate application of insight. This is where most people stop listening and where you start seeing. Discouragement is irrelevant. Past failures are irrelevant. Every missed cue in the past has no bearing on your capacity to act decisively in this moment. You are not permitted to be paralyzed by perceived limitations or fear of misinterpretation. The recognition of hidden needs demands unwavering attention and relentless mental focus. You will train yourself to notice micro shifts in energy, tone, and behavior, as though these were flashing alarms indicating critical information that must be decoded and addressed instantly. Understand that your own assumptions are dangerous. To assume that someone is fine simply because they speak the words is to accept mediocrity in perception. You will no longer tolerate. Average perception creates average outcomes. You are here to exit that category. Your awareness must penetrate beneath the superficial. Your attention must anchor to incongruence, to subtle tension, to the unsaid signals that betray the true state of mind of those around you. Every interaction is a test of perception, and your failure to observe and act is a personal failure, not a circumstantial one. The world offers no permission for inaction, and neither will you offer it to yourself. Every "I'm fine" is a challenge. Every masked need is a call to presence, and every hidden desire is a signal demanding immediate recognition. Your task is to detect, interpret, and act without hesitation, with clarity that surpasses ordinary observation, and with a mental discipline that leaves no room for doubt. You are accountable. You are responsible. You will perceive everything that is hidden and act decisively in response. If this feels intense, good. Growth never whispers. Every moment you spend ignoring what is unspoken is a moment lost to inefficiency, misunderstanding, and weakened influence. You will remove excuses and you will refuse complacency. Every interaction is an opportunity to detect. Every observation is a weapon, and every unspoken need is a signal that cannot be disregarded. Your mind will become precise, your focus will become absolute, and your actions will reflect the reality beneath the words rather than the words themselves. You will no longer accept surface-level communication as sufficient. You will recognize that the world conceals urgency behind politeness and simplicity. You will detect, decode, and respond to every hidden request, unspoken desire, and mass distress without hesitation or doubt. This is your responsibility. This is your discipline. Your attention is absolute, your awareness is complete, and your action is immediate. Do not pause. Do not wait. Do not allow words alone to dictate your perception. Every "I'm fine" is a command to observe. Every hesitation is a directive to act, and every hidden need is a signal demanding mastery. You will perceive, you will understand, you will respond.
Chapter 2. The Illusion of Explicit Requests. Your nervous system's on guard mode. You are required to abandon all assumptions about clarity, because the words spoken by others rarely reflect the nervous system's true state, and ignoring this dissonance leaves you vulnerable to repeated misjudgments. Every time someone insists they are fine, their autonomic nervous system may be in a state of alert, freeze, or partial shutdown, creating a discrepancy between appearance and reality that demands immediate recognition and disciplined observation. Your body already knows this. Your mind is just catching up. You must acknowledge that human behavior is inseparable from physiological responses, and failing to account for these signals compromises perception, influence, and relational accuracy. The urgency of noticing these cues is non-negotiable, because every moment of inattention reinforces the illusions that others create to protect themselves. In today's world, pretending is safer than telling the truth. That's the problem. You are not permitted to rely on verbal communication alone, because the vagal brake, the invisible regulator of emotional engagement and safety perception, dictates how truth manifests through body, tone, and micro-behavior. When the ventral vagal pathway is engaged, a person may speak calmly, maintain eye contact, and appear relaxed, yet subtle cues betray unresolved tension. This is why some conversations feel calm, but wrong. When the sympathetic system dominates, words may be clipped, speech may accelerate, or gestures may become rigid, reflecting a readiness for threat rather than openness. When the dorsal vagal system triggers partial shutdown, words may sound compliant, posture may collapse, and eyes may avert, masking internal distress that must be decoded without direct inquiry. Silence doesn't mean peace. Sometimes it means retreat. You are accountable for perceiving all these signals with precision. Notice how this explains why texts feel off, meetings feel tense, and silence feels heavy, even when nothing was said. You will recognize that "I'm fine" is often a defense mechanism rooted in automatic social masking, created by a nervous system seeking to protect itself from exposure, judgment, or vulnerability. In today's world, people don't hide because they're dishonest. They hide because honesty has consequences. Every unspoken nuance, every hesitation, and every shift in posture is a data point, a reflection of physiological reality that contradicts spoken assurances. Ignoring these signals is a surrender of awareness, a choice that allows miscommunication to become habitual, and a surrender of agency over both perception and response. Miss this often enough, and confusion becomes your default state. You must act decisively, perceiving what is hidden in order to navigate interactions with clarity and authority. You are required to interpret behavior not as static, but as dynamic reflections of the autonomic nervous system's regulation or dysregulation. People are not inconsistent. Their nervous systems are adaptive. The vagal system determines social engagement, connection, and perceived safety, and every interaction is filtered through this lens, whether you recognize it or not. A colleague may appear polite while experiencing sympathetic activation, resulting in forced smiles, accelerated speech, and subtle tension in limbs. A friend may assure you verbally that everything is fine, while dorsal vagal shutdown manifests as reduced responsiveness, avoidance of eye contact, and slower or muted vocal inflection. Every signal is a guide, and your mind must catalog, analyze, and respond with disciplined clarity to prevent misunderstanding. You will understand that the nervous system creates automatic, involuntary behaviors that are rarely under conscious control, and these behaviors reveal what the individual truly seeks or fears. The misalignment between spoken language and physiological reality is intentional in its concealment, yet it is never impervious to observation. Micro-expressions, breathing patterns, and posture shifts carry more truth than verbal affirmation. You must remain vigilant because a single overlooked physiological signal can lead to cascading errors in judgment, weakened authority, and missed opportunities for alignment, influence, or intervention. You are accountable for noticing incongruence immediately, because hesitation allows misinterpretation to solidify into habitual oversight. Every misread physiological cue diminishes precision in both perception and response. You must monitor eye contact, micro-gestures, changes in speech cadence and posture, understanding that each is a direct manifestation of autonomic state. Sympathetic activation signals readiness, potential aggression, or subtle distress. Dorsal vagal responses signal withdrawal, avoidance, or dissociation. Ventral vagal presence signals safety, engagement, and openness. Your task is to decode these states continuously, without reliance on verbal confirmation alone. If you can read nervous systems, you can read the room. Before the room turns on you, you will acknowledge the danger inherent in missing these cues. Failing to detect sympathetic activation may lead to conflict escalation. Ignoring dorsal vagal shutdown may result in disengagement, misunderstanding, or lost trust. Overlooking ventral vagal signals may cause you to misinterpret comfort as neutrality or indifference. And every misperception compounds relational inefficiency. Your responsibility is absolute. Your perception must be attuned to the physiological reality behind words, because truth is seldom delivered explicitly, and mastery over interactions requires that you act with awareness beyond what is said. You are required to interpret context alongside nervous system activation. Workplace interactions, family encounters, and casual conversations all contain layers of autonomic signaling that shape outcomes. A coworker under sympathetic strain may appear compliant during a meeting, yet subtle tension reveals underlying frustration or fear of judgment. A partner experiencing dorsal vagal activation may maintain polite conversation while physically retreating, signaling a need for space and safety. You must recognize that every context alters the expression of these autonomic responses, and your discipline is tested in your ability to detect, decode, and respond accurately under varying conditions. You will understand that explicit requests are rarely the source of insight. Physiological signals are. Every hidden need manifests through posture, tone, breathing, micro-expression, or timing. Your mind will catalog these signals automatically, creating a continuous map of safety, threat, or neutrality for every interaction. Misinterpretation is a choice, and you will refuse to choose ignorance. Awareness of autonomic cues transforms ordinary observation into strategic understanding, and you will exercise this understanding consistently, relentlessly, and without compromise. You are required to act with urgency because nervous system dysregulation intensifies over time if unaddressed. Sympathetic tension left unnoticed increases resistance, stress, and subtle aggression. Dorsal vagal shutdown left unacknowledged deepens withdrawal, disengagement, and passive compliance. Ventral vagal engagement left unrecognized squanders opportunities for connection, trust, and influence. Every moment demands precise observation, accurate interpretation, and decisive action based on the state of the other person's nervous system rather than superficial language. You will recognize that mastery of human interaction is inseparable from mastery of autonomic observation. Your ability to perceive the hidden realities of others, to decode nervous system signals, and to respond effectively is non-negotiable. Excuses for failing to notice tension, withdrawal, or engagement are unacceptable. Hesitation is dangerous. Surface-level verbal communication is insufficient. Your focus must anchor to incongruence. Your attention must monitor for autonomic shifts, and your response must reflect reality rather than the illusion presented by words. You will no longer allow verbal assurances to blind you to physiological truth. You will detect the unspoken, interpret the hidden, and act decisively based on observed nervous system states. Every interaction is an opportunity to measure safety, threat, or engagement, and your mind will process every micro-signal with precision, without pause, and without surrender to complacency. Awareness is your discipline. Observation is your power. Action is your authority. You will perceive the truth beneath every word, and your mastery will be absolute. Every moment you ignore the nervous system's signals is a moment lost to misinterpretation, inefficiency, and diminished influence. You are responsible for noticing, understanding, and responding. You will monitor the subtle, interpret the incongruent, and act decisively. Your attention is absolute, your perception is disciplined, and your response is immediate. You will no longer allow superficial communication to dictate your understanding. If you can read nervous systems, you can predict outcomes before words arrive. Your command is now: detect every hidden cue, interpret every autonomic shift, and respond with precision that leaves no ambiguity. Chapter 3. Unmasking Nonverbal Signals. You must stop trusting words as the sole indicator of truth, because every interaction contains an undercurrent of silent communication that is constant, urgent, and consequential. This is why intuition feels real. It's perception without language. Every posture, glance, and vocal inflection carries meaning, and failure to perceive these signals is a surrender of understanding, influence, and control. You are accountable for noticing micro-expressions, subtle shifts in rhythm, and changes in tone that convey more than any spoken phrase could ever deliver. Your brain catches these in milliseconds. Your awareness usually arrives late. To ignore them is to accept miscommunication as inevitable, to allow ambiguity to dictate outcomes, and to permit unnecessary inefficiency and conflict. This is why intuition feels real. It's perception without language. You will focus on body language beyond obvious gestures, because what is most meaningful is rarely pronounced, deliberate, or consciously performed. What leaks matters more than what's said. A barely perceptible tightening of the jaw, a subtle shift in shoulder alignment, or a momentary change in breathing pattern is a signal of tension, anticipation, or discomfort that must be decoded immediately. Every physical micro-change communicates intention, emotion, or need, and your perception must be trained to capture these with unerring precision. You are responsible for integrating these observations into every assessment of interactions, because ignoring them is a choice that weakens clarity and authority. You must understand that proximity, gaze, and touch carry significance independent of words. The distance someone maintains, the frequency and duration of eye contact, and the manner in which they initiate or avoid touch are direct indicators of comfort, safety, or internal conflict. You will interpret these markers with the same attention you give to speech, because they reveal alignment between verbal assurance and physiological reality. When someone leans away, avoids eye contact, or withdraws from touch, the message is not neutral. It is an immediate signal requiring recognition and action. Distance is rarely accidental. Every overlooked cue in spatial behavior is an opportunity for misunderstanding that you can no longer afford. You are accountable for recognizing situational nonverbals because context defines meaning. Silence is never empty. A pause may signify contemplation, resistance, or disengagement. A sudden change in demeanor, from relaxed to tense, signals a shift in perception of safety or social threat. These signals are immediate, subtle, and powerful, yet most people ignore them, leaving themselves vulnerable to misinterpretation and misalignment. You must catalog every instance, calibrate your understanding to baseline behavior, and treat deviation as critical information requiring attention, not as a benign anomaly. You will understand that vocal tone carries layers of unspoken meaning. This is why phone calls reveal what texts conceal. Changes in pitch, rhythm, or volume communicate internal states that words themselves cannot convey. A monotone phrase may indicate suppression of emotion. A sudden increase in pace may indicate heightened stress, and a brief hesitation may signal internal conflict or caution. Your mind must track these patterns continuously, without pause, because every nuance provides insight into the state of mind, intention, or need of others. Ignoring these signals is not permissible. It is surrendering situational clarity. You must recognize that micro-expressions reveal truths that conscious speech conceals. A fleeting contraction of the brow, a brief flare of nostrils, or the corner of a mouth twitching reveals emotion before words have a chance to distort it. Your perception will treat these micro-expressions as immediate evidence of internal states, not as incidental movement, because mastery requires constant awareness of these subtle indicators. Hesitation, dismissal, or disbelief in their significance is a failure of mental discipline that you will not allow. You are responsible for interpreting the alignment of all nonverbal channels simultaneously. Posture, gesture, facial expression, vocal tone, gaze, and proximity operate in coordination to convey a composite message. A single cue may be ambiguous, but when multiple signals align, the meaning becomes unmistakable. Your discipline is to detect congruence or incongruence continuously, integrating each data point into an accurate representation of internal state and unspoken need. This is not optional. This is required. You must understand the immediacy of action when nonverbal cues reveal misalignment. When someone shifts posture abruptly, averts gaze, or alters speech pattern, the window to address underlying discomfort is present and fleeting. Hesitation in response is a surrender to uncertainty, creating opportunities for confusion, resentment, or disengagement. Your responsibility is to act decisively, calibrating interaction based on observed nonverbal signals rather than verbal claims, ensuring alignment between perception and reality at all times. You will acknowledge the silent language of touch, because its absence or presence communicates far more than spoken consent or denial. A light touch, a reassuring hand, or physical withdrawal communicates approval, distress, or avoidance. Every action or inaction in this dimension signals internal states that cannot be ignored. You are required to read these signals continuously, to process them in real time, and to adjust interaction accordingly, because missed cues are lost opportunities for influence, clarity, and trust. You must understand the importance of subtle timing in nonverbal communication. A pause before responding, a delayed gesture, or a shift in attention communicates intentional or involuntary processing that reveals underlying emotions or needs. These temporal variations are not negligible. They carry the urgency of internal regulation, often signaling safety concerns, stress, or desire for autonomy. Your mind will catalog every variation, integrate it with other nonverbal cues, and inform your response with precise awareness. Ignoring these temporal patterns is no longer acceptable. You will comprehend that context intensifies the meaning of nonverbal cues. Interaction in a high-pressure environment amplifies posture changes, eye contact deviations, and voice modulation. Social hierarchy, familiarity, and environmental stress all impact the manifestation of micro-expressions, gestures, and vocal shifts. You are accountable for factoring context into your interpretation, understanding that identical gestures can carry entirely different meaning under different circumstances, and that precision in analysis demands contextual calibration. You must recognize the compounding effect of repeated nonverbal signals. When subtle tension persists across multiple interactions, the cumulative significance cannot be dismissed. Your perception must identify patterns, calibrate baseline behavior, and interpret deviations with precision. Patterns reveal chronic discomfort, unexpressed needs, or suppressed conflict. Ignoring these patterns allows subtle distress to remain unaddressed, weakening trust, clarity, and efficiency. You are accountable for noticing repetition, interpreting it accurately, and responding decisively. You will understand that silence itself is a message. The absence of speech conveys approval, dissent, disengagement, or threat depending on baseline behavior, context, and accompanying nonverbal signals. Silence must be treated as active communication rather than emptiness, requiring disciplined observation and immediate mental processing. Every pause, hesitation, or gap is an opportunity for insight, and failure to acknowledge it is a failure of perception. You will no longer accept silence as neutrality. You must integrate nonverbal observation into every interaction, treating it as the primary channel for truth, while words serve as secondary confirmation at best. Your discipline is continuous, your attention is unwavering, and your interpretation is methodical. Every glance, posture change, and tonal variation is a directive, a command for you to perceive, process, and respond with clarity and authority. You are accountable for aligning response with unspoken reality rather than verbal assertion. You will remove all excuses for overlooking subtle communication. Every micro-expression, shift in gaze, or modulation in tone is data that demands attention, interpretation, and action. Hesitation, misreading, or dismissal is no longer permissible. Your perception will be precise, your attention unwavering, and your response decisive. You are required to act with awareness, integrating each nonverbal cue into a continuous understanding of internal states, safety, and intention. You will no longer allow superficial observation to dictate understanding. You will notice, interpret, and respond to the silent language of micro-expressions, vocal tone, gaze, posture, and touch. Your command is to perceive fully, understand thoroughly, and act decisively. Every interaction is a map, every movement a signal, and every pause an opportunity for insight. You will act with precision, clarity, and absolute awareness of the truth beneath words. Once you start seeing this, conversations stop surprising you. Chapter 4. Unmasking Nonverbal Signals. Glimpses into the autonomic nervous system. You must understand immediately that nonverbal communication is inseparable from autonomic responses, because every micro-expression, posture adjustment, and vocal shift originates from physiological regulation that cannot be fully controlled consciously. This is the part they never taught you, because awareness creates leverage. Every signal, subtle or pronounced, is the body's unfiltered response to perceived safety, threat, or engagement. And ignoring these signals is a conscious surrender of perception and authority. Words are edited. Nervous systems are not. You are accountable for perceiving every autonomic indicator, decoding it, and responding precisely, because the nervous system speaks truth when words are crafted to conceal, delay, or distract. You will recognize that micro-expressions are not incidental. These flashes are truth escaping control. They are brief windows into the internal state, direct products of autonomic activation, reflecting sympathetic readiness, dorsal vagal withdrawal, or ventral vagal engagement. A slight narrowing of the eyes, a fleeting lift of the brows, or a minor twitch of the lips signals an emotional or physiological shift that must be perceived with absolute focus. These micro-changes are involuntary, impossible to fully mask, and more truthful than any verbal assertion, because they emerge from the nervous system without conscious interference. You are required to read them continuously, without pause, and integrate their meaning into every interaction. You must observe vocal tone as a direct manifestation of autonomic activity. This is why calm words can still feel aggressive. Changes in pitch, rhythm, cadence, and volume are produced automatically, and they reveal whether the individual is in sympathetic arousal, dorsal vagal freeze, or ventral vagal regulation. Rapid speech, clipped words, or strained tone indicates heightened arousal or stress, signaling a nervous system prepared for action rather than connection. Slow, muted, or flat speech may indicate dorsal vagal disengagement, signaling withdrawal, shutdown, or avoidance. Clear, modulated, steady tone demonstrates ventral vagal presence, reflecting perceived safety, engagement, and openness. Your perception will catalog these patterns as a primary source of truth, because spoken words alone are insufficient. You are accountable for reading posture and movement as autonomic expressions. Subtle contractions in the shoulders, leaning forward or backward, and adjustments in limb positioning are involuntary reflections of perceived threat or comfort. When someone retracts subtly, shifts weight frequently, or displays tension in their core, these are signs of sympathetic arousal or defensive positioning. When posture collapses, breathing slows, and energy diminishes, it is a dorsal vagal response indicating withdrawal and diminished social engagement. When posture is open, balanced, and fluid, it signals ventral vagal regulation, readiness to engage, and perceived safety. Your task is to interpret these signals as physiological truth rather than assumption. You must recognize that gaze and proximity are autonomic indicators of internal state. Eye contact, its duration, and the alignment of visual attention reflect engagement, trust, and perceived safety. Avoidance of gaze signals withdrawal, uncertainty, or discomfort. Prolonged or fixed gaze may reflect hyperarousal or sympathetic dominance. Physical proximity and orientation reveal comfort and intention. Leaning closer signals readiness for connection, while retreating or angled orientation signals perceived threat, caution, or disengagement. Every change in space, gaze, or orientation is an unspoken communication that demands immediate attention, and ignoring these signals compromises understanding and influence. You will acknowledge that silence carries distinct autonomic signatures. Dorsal vagal shutdown manifests as reduced vocalization, slowed responses, and minimal movement, signaling a need for safety, disengagement, or avoidance. Sympathetic activation produces rapid responses, abrupt silences, or speech interruptions, signaling stress, urgency, or a readiness for confrontation. Ventral vagal presence allows for measured pauses, smooth speech, and openness, signaling comfort and willingness to engage. You are required to decode these silent markers as intentionally as you decode words because physiological signals are never deceptive, whereas words can be. You must understand the alignment of all non-verbal channels as a composite autonomic map. Micro-expressions, posture, gaze, vocal tone, and breathing operate simultaneously, producing a multidimensional signal of internal state. Congruence across these channels signals reliability, authenticity, and alignment with spoken words. Incongruence, such as verbal reassurance paired with sympathetic tension or dorsal vagal withdrawal, is a red flag demanding immediate observation, interpretation, and action. Your mental discipline will treat this alignment as critical information, not optional detail, and you will never disregard it. You are accountable for contextualizing autonomic signals according to environment. Stressful or hierarchical settings amplify sympathetic responses, reduce ventral vagal engagement, and increase dorsal vagal withdrawal. Familiar, relaxed environments allow ventral vagal expression to dominate, producing authenticity, openness, and receptivity. You must calibrate each observation against baseline behavior and situational pressure. Because identical nonverbal signals carry different meaning depending on context. Misreading context is a failure of perception, and your focus will ensure that this never occurs. You will recognize the immediacy of action when autonomic signals reveal misalignment or unmet need. Sympathetic tension, if left unaddressed, compounds stress and resistance. Dorsal vagal withdrawal, if ignored, solidifies disengagement and internal conflict. Ventral vagal engagement, if unnoticed, represents an opportunity for trust and connection that may be lost. Every autonomic cue carries both warning and opportunity, and your discipline is to detect, decode, and act on them without hesitation or error. You must integrate autonomic insight with nonverbal observation continuously. Every subtle facial contraction, shift in breathing, micro-change in posture, alteration of vocal tone, or gaze deviation is evidence of physiological reality demanding recognition. Your mind will process these signals with relentless precision, creating a continuous map of internal states for every person in your environment. Excuses for oversight are unacceptable, and hesitation is prohibited. Mastery requires immediate translation of observation into understanding and action. You are required to perceive deviations from baseline behavior as priority signals. Any sudden posture change, abrupt gaze avoidance, or vocal shift is an autonomic alarm, and you will treat it as such. Repeated patterns of micro-expression, subtle tension, or movement fluctuations signal unresolved physiological needs or internal conflict. You will catalog these deviations, analyze their meaning, and respond decisively, because recognition without action is failure disguised as observation. You will acknowledge the power of combining micro-expressions, vocal cues, posture, gaze, and context as a multidimensional indicator of safety, threat, or engagement. Every individual exhibits unique baseline patterns, and mastery requires that you identify these patterns immediately, detect deviations, and interpret their significance with absolute clarity. This integration transforms ordinary observation into strategic insight and positions you to act with authority, precision, and immediacy in every interaction. You must remove all excuses for misreading physiological signals. Every shift, contraction, pause, or tonal alteration is data that cannot be ignored. Your attention is absolute. Your perception is disciplined. Your response is immediate. You will decode autonomic signals in real time, integrate them with nonverbal and contextual cues, and respond decisively. This is your responsibility. This is your command. You will perceive fully, interpret thoroughly, and act decisively on every autonomic indicator. Every micro-expression, vocal shift, posture change, gaze adjustment, and temporal pause is an unfiltered signal of truth. Your awareness will anchor to these signals as the primary source of understanding, and your response will reflect reality rather than the illusion presented by words. Mastery is non-negotiable. Attention is absolute. Action is immediate. You will command your mind to read every signal, process every deviation, and act with precision that leaves no ambiguity or uncertainty. You will no longer allow words alone to dictate perception. Every autonomic cue is an opportunity, a command, and a directive for absolute understanding and decisive response. When you read physiology, you stop guessing intent. You will act. You will see. You will respond. Chapter 5. Context is king, the situational lens. You must immediately recognize that behavior cannot be understood in isolation. Context decides meaning, always, because every action, gesture, and verbal response is filtered through the lens of environment, social hierarchy, and situational pressures, and failing to account for this context is a surrender of accuracy, control, and influence. Every interaction occurs within a network of variables that shape internal states and external expression. The same person becomes someone else under pressure, and ignoring these variables leaves perception incomplete and response ineffective. You are accountable for observing, interpreting, and acting based on the dynamic conditions surrounding every individual, because mastery demands precision that transcends superficial appearances. You will understand that the same person behaves differently depending on the environment, because stress, expectation, and perceived threat amplify or suppress autonomic responses. A colleague may appear composed during a casual conversation, yet the same individual may tighten posture, shorten responses, or avert gaze in a high-pressure meeting. A friend may be open and expressive in private, but closed, quiet, and contracted in a group setting. These differences are neither incidental nor random. They are the direct result of contextual influence on the nervous system and internal regulation, and your observation must account for them with immediate clarity and precision. You are required to interpret behavior through the unspoken rules of social environments. Most people don't speak freely, they calculate first. Cultural norms, professional hierarchy, and relational history dictate which needs can be expressed, which must be masked, and which will emerge only in subtle signals. Every gesture, pause, and vocal shift is filtered through these rules, and your task is to recognize the constraints placed on expression, decoding signals that exist beneath layers of expectation and conditioning. To ignore this is to misread the internal state and compromise every response, leaving you susceptible to misalignment, inefficiency, and relational friction. You will recognize that past interactions provide critical insight into current behavior, because repeated patterns reveal autonomic baselines, triggers, and coping mechanisms that govern response under stress. Every individual has a nervous system baseline shaped by experience, history, and prior interaction, and deviation from this baseline is a signal of altered state, either positive or negative. Your mind will catalog past observations, integrate them with current non-verbal, verbal, and physiological signals, and form a precise understanding of the present state, because failure to contextualize reduces accuracy and diminishes influence. You must acknowledge that the situational lens amplifies subtle cues. Minor shifts in tone, posture, or gaze may carry greater significance under high stress, uncertainty, or social scrutiny. A small hesitation in speech may indicate resistance in a professional environment, but reflect caution in a personal setting. A fleeting contraction in posture may signal mild discomfort among friends, but indicates imminent stress in a formal scenario. Your perception must calibrate each observation against context, recognizing that identical signals can convey entirely different states depending on environmental conditions. You are accountable for identifying when context obscures need, because many individuals suppress internal states to comply with social expectations or perceived norms. What is visible in words or gestures is often filtered, edited, or delayed to maintain appearance, avoid conflict, or protect autonomy. Your task is to perceive the underlying intention behind the filtered expression, integrating micro-expressions, autonomic signals, and situational pressures into a coherent assessment. Ignoring this complexity is a surrender of perception, a choice to accept surface-level reality over physiological and contextual truth. You will observe that environmental stress triggers predictable patterns in nervous system response, and your responsibility is to decode them accurately. Under pressure, sympathetic activation produces rigidity, rapid speech, and tension in movement. Withdrawal, silence, and minimal movement reflect dorsal vagal regulation under stress or disengagement. Contextual safety enables ventral vagal engagement, producing calm, fluid movement, steady gaze, and open gestures. You will treat these signals as evidence, continuously integrating them with situational knowledge, baseline behavior, and prior interactions to produce accurate interpretation. You must interpret the intentions behind behavior as filtered through relational dynamics. A subordinate may display compliance in words while exhibiting subtle tension in posture or gaze, signaling internal conflict, fear, or resistance. A peer may mask disagreement behind politeness, expressing dissatisfaction only through micro-expressions or brief tonal fluctuations. Recognizing these patterns requires mental discipline, continuous observation, and contextual calibration. Your perception will align with both environmental variables and the nervous system's manifestation, because understanding behavior without situational context is incomplete, inaccurate, and potentially costly. You are required to notice the interaction between personal history and situational stress, because prior experiences shape autonomic response, expression, and perceived threat. A minor comment may trigger heightened sympathetic activation due to past experiences, even if the present threat is negligible. A lack of response may indicate dorsal vagal disengagement rooted in previous violation of safety, rather than indifference to current interaction. Your mind must integrate historical context, situational pressures, and autonomic signals into a continuous map of likely intent, need, and vulnerability, because partial perception leads to repeated misjudgment. You will understand that precise perception demands simultaneous tracking of multiple variables. Posture, gaze, micro-expression, vocal tone, breathing, and timing all interact with environmental stressors, relational hierarchy, and prior patterns to produce a dynamic presentation. A single deviation may signal immediate need, while patterns over time reveal chronic tension, unspoken desire, or habitual coping strategy. You are accountable for integrating these layers, continuously calibrating observation against context, and producing interpretation that aligns with both physiological truth and environmental pressures. You must act decisively when situational analysis reveals misalignment, unmet need, or autonomic dysregulation. Intervention may require subtle adjustment of proximity, modulating tone, or changing engagement to re-establish ventral vagal regulation, facilitate connection, or prevent escalation. Hesitation is unacceptable. Your perception and response must be immediate, calibrated to context, and informed by cumulative observation, because mastery requires continuous alignment of awareness, action, and environment. You are responsible for detecting situationally amplified cues that indicate underlying need or stress. Minor inconsistencies in posture, gaze, or tone in one environment may become amplified signals under pressure, revealing critical information that is invisible in low-stakes situations. You will identify these moments and act with precision, because failure to do so allows minor discomfort or hidden need to escalate into disengagement, miscommunication, or relational breakdown. You will integrate environmental analysis with autonomic observation to predict behavior and guide response. Every deviation from baseline behavior is not random. It is a coded signal of internal state, filtered through situational variables and informed by relational history. Your mind will process these variables simultaneously, producing immediate, accurate, and actionable insight into unspoken needs and intentions. You are accountable for this integration because it forms the foundation of mastery in every interaction. You must recognize that ignoring context is equivalent to ignoring truth. Words alone are insufficient, nonverbal cues alone are incomplete, and physiological signals alone require situational interpretation. True understanding arises only when all layers, verbal, nonverbal, autonomic, and contextual, are integrated, calibrated, and acted upon with precision. Hesitation, doubt, or inattention compromises clarity, and you will no longer allow these weaknesses to exist within your observation or response. You will observe, interpret, and act based on context, history, autonomic signals, and nonverbal cues simultaneously. Every interaction is a map, every deviation a signal, every pause a window into unspoken needs and intentions. Your mind will integrate these layers continuously, producing clarity where ambiguity once reigned, and your actions will align with truth, not illusion. Your discipline is absolute. Your attention is unwavering. Your action is immediate. Ignore context, and you don't misunderstand people. You misunderstand reality. Command your mind now. Perceive the environment, decode behavior, integrate context, and act decisively without hesitation. Chapter 6. The psychology behind unspoken needs. You must immediately recognize that every unspoken need is a reflection of internal strategy shaped by past experiences, learned behaviors, and autonomic regulation, and ignoring these strategies is a surrender of understanding, control, and influence. hidden needs don't vanish. They rewrote. Every human interaction contains layers of need hidden behind habitual coping mechanisms, and your task is to detect, decode, and respond to these signals with precision and immediacy. What people don't ask for still controls their behavior. You are accountable for perceiving the strategies embedded in unspoken behavior, because mastery requires awareness of intention beyond the surface of words or gestures. You will understand that attachment history governs the way needs are expressed or concealed. This is why two people can want connection and still miss each other. Individuals develop patterns of seeking security, maintaining autonomy, or avoiding perceived threat, and these patterns manifest automatically through nervous system responses. A person may suppress verbal requests for help due to sympathetic hyperarousal conditioned by past criticism, or they may withdraw entirely through dorsal vagal shutdown when safety is uncertain. Others may engage openly through ventral vagal regulation when they perceive trust and connection. You are required to decode these patterns without reliance on explicit statements, because they reveal the truth beneath controlled expression. You are accountable for identifying cognitive biases that obscure unspoken needs, because perception itself is filtered through prior experience, expectation, and habitual assumptions. The desire for autonomy may trigger resistance to engagement even when help is needed, masking the true internal state behind politeness or indifference. Fear of vulnerability may produce verbal affirmation paired with micro-expressions of tension, signaling distress despite outward reassurance. Avoidance of conflict may manifest as minimal engagement, contracted posture, or prolonged silence, reflecting nervous system adaptation rather than absence of need. Your perception will integrate these biases to produce accurate insight into hidden desire and intention. You must recognize that the nervous system employs these strategies automatically, producing consistent patterns of behavior that are reliable if observed carefully. Sympathetic hyperarousal triggers readiness, tension, and rapid speech, while dorsal vagal shutdown produces withdrawal, silence, and low energy. Ventral vagal engagement signals safety, openness, and receptivity. These physiological strategies shape communication, conceal need, and guide interaction, and your mind will decode them as an immediate reflection of intent rather than assumption. Failure to recognize these strategies is a conscious choice that diminishes awareness, influence, and relational clarity. You will understand that every unspoken need is encoded in behavior through subtle autonomic expression. A fleeting glance, a micro-expression of contraction or release, a momentary vocal shift, or a small postural adjustment signals desire, discomfort, or threat. These signals are automatic, arising from physiological regulation, and they require your continuous attention, cataloging, and interpretation. Words alone are insufficient. Behavior filtered through nervous system strategy is the only reliable measure of unspoken need, and your responsibility is to act with clarity based on this evidence. You must recognize that suppression of expression is intentional, adaptive, and habitual. Individuals conceal need to protect autonomy, avoid judgment, or maintain perceived control, yet this concealment produces observable signals if you are disciplined enough to detect them. Hesitation, contraction, vocal microshifts, and changes in gaze or proximity reveal hidden desire, frustration, or distress. Your mind will track these signals without pause, correlating them with context, past patterns, and autonomic indicators to produce actionable insight. Excuses for misinterpretation are no longer permissible. You are accountable for integrating knowledge of attachment, cognitive bias, and autonomic response into a continuous map of unspoken needs. Every individual exhibits patterns shaped by experience, environmental feedback, and learned survival strategies, and deviation from these patterns signals unmet need or altered state. Your task is to monitor, interpret, and act on these deviations with immediate clarity, because ignoring them leaves communication incomplete, opportunities missed, and influence diminished. You will perceive the truth beneath habitual concealment. You will understand that unspoken needs are often contextually triggered, and the environment amplifies or suppresses expression. Stress, hierarchy, relational history, and situational expectation influence whether need manifests overtly or remains hidden. A minor trigger may produce sympathetic hyperarousal, resulting in tension or abrupt speech, while a higher perceived threat may elicit dorsal vagal shutdown, withdrawal, or silence. Conversely, perceived safety produces ventral vagal engagement, signaling receptivity, openness, and readiness to connect. You are required to interpret need through this lens continuously. You must recognize that fear of vulnerability is a fundamental barrier to explicit communication, yet it is always visible if observed through autonomic and non-verbal cues. Subtle tension in posture, fleeting expressions of apprehension, or rapid shifts in tone indicate internal conflict masked by verbal affirmation. These indicators are consistent, measurable, and actionable, and your mind will process them immediately to understand underlying desire, perceived threat, and the state of engagement. Hesitation or assumption based on words alone is unacceptable. You are accountable for noticing the interplay of autonomy and co-regulation. Many individuals suppress need or resist engagement because exposure risks autonomy or perceived control. Yet micro-behaviors reveal underlying desire for connection, safety, or assistance. Subtle gestures, momentary gaze shifts, and micro-expressions provide clues that must be integrated with context, relational history, and physiological observation to produce accurate insight. Your perception will treat every deviation from baseline as a priority signal, because mastery depends on action informed by hidden realities rather than superficial communication. You will acknowledge that avoidance of conflict is expressed through micro-patterns that are physiologically consistent and immediately measurable. Contraction in posture, reduction of eye contact, delayed response, or flattened tone signals withdrawal and suppression, reflecting dorsal vagal adaptation to perceived threat or discomfort. Your mind will integrate these markers with situational knowledge to anticipate needs, address unspoken desire, and act decisively before disengagement solidifies. Inaction is unacceptable. Precision in perception is mandatory. You must recognize that decoding unspoken needs is an active process, requiring continuous attention, context awareness, and physiological observation. Every signal, micro-expression, postural shift, vocal variation, and gaze adjustment is evidence of internal state, filtered through learned strategies for survival, autonomy, or co-regulation. You will catalog, interpret, and respond to these signals as data, not assumption, producing immediate, calibrated understanding and action. Hesitation, dismissal, or delay is failure. You are responsible for translating perception into action that addresses underlying need rather than surface-level communication. When you detect concealed desire, tension, or threat, you will respond in a manner that aligns with the individual's autonomic state, safety perception, and contextual reality. Your action must be precise, immediate, and informed by the full spectrum of observation, because responding to words alone perpetuates misalignment, inefficiency, and disengagement. You will no longer tolerate assumptions based on verbal affirmation alone. Every unspoken need is measurable, observable, and actionable if attention, discipline, and situational awareness are applied. You will perceive autonomic signals, decode habitual strategies, integrate context, and act decisively. Awareness is absolute. Observation is continuous. Action is immediate. Command your mind. Recognize every concealed need, interpret every autonomic and behavioral signal, and act decisively without hesitation. Silence is rarely empty. It's usually full of calculation. Chapter 7. Practical Decoding and Empathetic Action. You must understand immediately that perception without action is incomplete. This is where observers separate from operators, because detecting hidden needs, autonomic signals, and micro-expressions only grants insight, not influence, and mastery demands immediate translation into calibrated response. Every unspoken desire, every subtle cue, and every deviation from baseline behavior is a directive for observation, analysis, and action. Insight unused is influence wasted. Hesitation is not permitted, because the value of insight is realized only when it informs deliberate, precise intervention. You are accountable for moving beyond recognition to decisive implementation, aligning response with truth rather than surface-level assertion. You will apply the what-if framework consistently, because every observed behavior carries multiple possible causes that are not apparent through words alone. Ask yourself what else could drive contraction, gaze avoidance, subtle tension, or sudden silence, considering perceived safety, environmental threat, relational history, and autonomic state. You are required to generate multiple hypotheses for every deviation from baseline, and you will test them through observation, adjustment of engagement, and careful response. Every unconsidered possibility is a failure of mental discipline, and you will eliminate all such gaps in perception immediately. You must employ mirroring with precision. You've felt this work on you before. Now you'll use it deliberately, because subtle replication of posture, tone, breathing, and gaze establishes unconscious alignment and signals presence, safety, and receptivity. You will mirror not superficially, but deliberately, modulating your own behavior to reflect the autonomic cues of the other while maintaining conscious control over your own state. This alignment produces ventral vagal activation in the other person, increasing openness, facilitating disclosure, and revealing unspoken needs without direct questioning. Hesitation, exaggeration, or inaccuracy in mirroring diminishes efficacy, and you will execute it with exacting attention at all times. You are accountable for active listening that transcends verbal content. Because words are rarely sufficient indicators of internal state, you will track vocal tone, rhythm, cadence, and pauses, integrating these with micro-expressions, gaze, posture, and situational context to produce continuous understanding of underlying need. Listening is not passive. It is a mental discipline that requires unbroken attention, rapid analysis, and immediate internal synthesis of multiple data points. Failure to process information fully results in missed opportunity, misalignment, and diminished influence. You will act decisively when unspoken need is detected, because observation alone has no power. Every autonomic signal, every micro-expression, every deviation from baseline is a directive to intervene, adjust, or facilitate resolution. You will provide solutions, responses, or accommodations that address the underlying need rather than the surface-level statement, creating conditions for safety, connection, and alignment. Words alone cannot satisfy need. Calibrated action is required to convert perception into influence and trust. You must understand that timing is critical. Late awareness costs more than no awareness, because delayed response allows autonomic signals to escalate, misalignment to solidify, and disengagement to deepen. Sympathetic tension left unaddressed produces resistance or subtle aggression. Dorsal vagal withdrawal, if ignored, produces persistent disengagement or shutdown. Ventral vagal alignment, if unnoticed, represents opportunity lost for trust, engagement, and clarity. Your discipline is to act immediately, guided by observation, context, and understanding, translating insight into precise, effective action. You are accountable for offering solutions that match the true underlying need rather than the explicit statement. When someone says, "I'm fine," yet exhibits contraction, tension, or withdrawal, your response must provide safety, alignment, or engagement, not superficial affirmation. Adjust proximity, tone, or engagement style to recalibrate autonomic state, restore ventral vagal activation, and allow truth to emerge. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to convert observation into connection, analysis into influence, and recognition into action. You will recognize that empathy is a skill grounded in perception and action, not sentiment. It is the disciplined alignment of observation, understanding, and response to produce safety, clarity, and relational efficiency. You will integrate micro-expression analysis, autonomic decoding, situational context, and behavioral alignment to act in a way that addresses unspoken needs while maintaining authority, focus, and decisiveness. Emotional softness without precision is weakness. Your response will be calibrated, controlled, and unwavering. You must track patterns over time because repeated signals reveal chronic needs, habitual tension, or persistent misalignment. Observation in isolation captures only immediate deviation, but consistent monitoring produces predictive insight, allowing preemptive adjustment, intervention, and alignment. Every repeated micro-signal, posture contraction, vocal fluctuation, or gaze deviation is evidence of systemic pattern that must be understood, integrated, and addressed without delay. Failure to track pattern is a failure to master interaction. You are required to integrate situational context into every action, because environment, social hierarchy, relational history, and immediate pressure influence both autonomic signaling and behavioral expression. Response must be calibrated not only to observed signals, but also to environmental conditions, potential triggers, and perceived safety of the individual. Every action, adjustment, or intervention is filtered through situational lens to maximize impact, minimize threat, and produce alignment between perception and reality. Hesitation, assumption, or omission is unacceptable. You will perceive every signal as actionable data, and your mind will continuously synthesize multiple layers: autonomic state, micro-expression, posture, gaze, tone, context, and pattern. Observation without integration produces no advantage. Analysis without action produces no influence. Perception without response produces no mastery. You are accountable for integrating all signals continuously and acting decisively with clarity, precision, and authority. You must understand that mastery requires relentless repetition and immediate feedback. Every micro-expression, shift in gaze, postural adjustment, or vocal modulation is a command to observe, process, and act. You will treat each signal as critical, calibrating your response in real time to produce alignment, safety, and engagement. Hesitation is surrender. Ignoring opportunity is failure. Discipline requires constant attention, immediate action, and unwavering integration of observation and response. You are accountable for converting recognition into intervention, analysis into alignment, and observation into influence. Every unspoken need is a directive for action. Every deviation from baseline is a signal requiring response, and every autonomic shift is an opportunity to create safety, connection, and clarity. Words alone are insufficient. Calibrated action is mandatory. You will no longer allow superficial engagement to dictate outcomes. Observation, decoding, and context integration must inform every response. You will act with authority, clarity, and immediacy, addressing underlying need, restoring alignment, and ensuring engagement. Every interaction is an opportunity to master perception, influence behavior, and create conditions for connection. Hesitation is gone. Doubt is irrelevant. Your command is absolute. Command your mind now. Perceive every hidden signal, decode every autonomic cue, integrate context, and act decisively with precision, authority, and unwavering clarity.